Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third and final portion of lecture for today. We are going to finish up our discussion on minimalism by talking about Terry Riley. So to review, we've talked about Steve Reich, a huge fan of using phasing. We've talked about Philip Glass, a big fan of using additive and subtractive procedure in his music, but also this sort of multidisciplinary interest where we're engaging in interdisciplinary art for Philip Glass. Terry Riley, on the other hand, sort of takes a little bit of a page from some non-Western musical tradition, such as gamelan, and not that Steve Reich doesn't, but like also African drumming, but the idea of rhythm in these kind of repeating circles or segments that kind of build to create a piece. Terry Riley is probably most well known for his work called In C. And In C is a piece that's presented just on one page, and it has, more than 50 different musical cells, like small repeating ostinatos, and a set of instructions. And the instructions tell the performer, or performers, and it can be for a flexible ensemble, that you can drop out of the piece whenever you might like, but that everyone needs to be a particular number of cells away from one another. You cannot veer too far off in one distance or another. And the piece comes to an end, much like it starts, with this sort of repetition of the note C. And that's how the piece begins, is C, 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 C. It's a very cool piece and varies greatly based on the instrumentation that you listen to. So I've picked one that's much more percussive, but because of its flexible nature, it's also flexible in duration, much like Steve Reich's phasing pieces. Piano phase more so than clapping music. But this idea of flexibility is something that interests a lot of minimalist composers. Throughout these three composers, we're going to, and specifically with Terry Riley, we're going to continue hearing the idea of gradual transformation. So each of these cells kind of builds upon one another. Let's go ahead and listen to a good selection of one particular performance, although there are many, of Terry Riley's In C. Okay, here we go. So this is, hopefully it won't be removed from my video. It's a very cool performance, live at the Tate, so Tate Museum of Modern Art. This is the first cell. We're hearing the second cell of the first cell. Another cell is just entered. At some point, it becomes very difficult to tell how many cells are ongoing at a time. So the performers have the sheet music in front of them and can kind of follow along with what they're hearing. player that's kind of on the longer side, which is the first one that we encounter, the one that we're hearing right now, is one of those flute instruments. Anyway, continues on and on. I so suggest like putting this on at some point just to have it run. It's 42 minutes of this particular performance. This one takes a couple of liberties in terms of like the flute player kind of going off a little bit off book, but there are a variety of other kinds of performances of this work that are greatly changed by the different tone colors of instruments. And that's exactly where we're headed for our second unit, which I can't believe it starts after today's lecture. So our second unit, just to kind of preview that, timbre, tone color, the way individual instruments sound. So this piece sounds much different being played for an orchestra, sounds way different being played for a small ensemble. You know what, in fact, let me go ahead and pull up a completely different version of it just to give you an idea. Same musical material, the idea of flexibility and indeterminacy is going to greatly change every single performance of this piece. Hold on. Okay, here we go. Completely different ensemble, completely different arrangement, completely different space, completely different performance. Same piece. Very good. So performances of this piece are greatly, greatly changed by who is actually performing it. Such a wonderful idea. So that's a little bit of Terry Riley's In C. A really, really rhythmically driven piece with lots of attention to detail when it comes to changing the tone color of the work or the timbre. And that's all based on the instrumentalist making those decisions live. So because of its flexibility, Terry Riley's In C is performed a whole bunch. I've performed it myself a number of times. We've listened to a lot of like really driving minimalism. I want to end today's lecture with playing something that is minimalist in a completely different way. And this is also by Terry Riley, something that's much more recent and modern, although everything is kind of modern that I've showed you today. Piano piece, very slow moving, called The Philosopher's Hand. And what's happening here is, again, gradual transformation, but the tempo here, or the internal pulse, is much less rhythmically driving. Still fits within the sort of minimalist school. So let's take a listen to something that's kind of a departure from what we've listened to, both in size and sound, certainly. All right, here we go, The Philosopher's Hand. Very good. So there are these like kind of sound clouds that are very nebulous, that seem to kind of have the same quality, but have a little bit of variation to them, slowly evolving. Instead of that rhythmic drive that we've been encountering in a number of different examples, like this has rubato, that flexibility of time where things push and pull and ebb and flow. By and large, we've heard in minimalism overall a lot of polyphony, where we're listening to multiple things at a time, but polyphony with high amounts of repetition, strong use of ostinato, repeating musical ideas in order to create these musical compositions. Each of the three composers that we listen to has a different kind of attitude and ideas to what they want to do with minimalism. Steve Reich, big fan of phasing. Philip Glass, really into interdisciplinary arts, opera, and works for voice. Terry Riley, a little bit more influenced by non-Western musics, just sort of to put a larger kind of label on it. But big departures than what we heard in popular music, which we surveyed over our last two lectures. Hopefully you guys are getting a better understanding of texture, the ongoing musical material at one given moment, who sort of falls into what category, in addition to what's happening with meter. So at this point, we are concluding our first official unit, which means our second unit is about timbre, instrumental tone color, how individual instruments sound. One of my favorite areas of music. It has to do with instrumentation and orchestration. So we're going to survey a lot of instruments, talk about the string quartet, different percussion ensembles, and composers creating even new instruments as a part of our next unit. So before you move on to the second unit, you should wrap up things for the first unit. So the assignment number 1, which is a reading on Copeland, unless I've decided to change things up, is going to help reinforce some ideas that we covered in our first unit, and also preview some ideas that we'll talk about for our second unit. You guys also should gear up for that quiz. So review the listing examples, and the lecture notes. That is my big key to to you for the quiz. So I wish you luck and look forward to seeing you guys for our second unit, one of my favorite subjects, timbre. Bye.